Hi, folks. I'm Geoff Koshin West. I'm founder of Integral Transformative Bodywork and massage therapist at Inspire Health. Today, we're going to be talking about what is MFR. MFR means myo meaning muscle. Muscle means myo. Has to do with our muscle system. Fascia has to do with this three-dimensional continuous tissue that runs through the whole body and kind of holds the whole system together. Release just simply refers to the fact that as we do this work, we go from usually a tightening to a softening. So what the heck is fascia, by the way? Anatomically speaking, it is considered a type of connective tissue. It is a single continuous tissue that wraps every organ, system, and bone in the body. It's pretty miraculous that way. Whether we're talking about the more superficial layers of the skin and the derma, or we're talking about the deep portions of our human body, the fascia is present and it's functioning. It used to be considered an inert tissue, meaning it didn't do much, but it's been more recently recategorized as a contractile tissue like muscles and tendons. It has two components. It has an elastocollagen microtubule component. It resembles a mesh fabric webbing type of a deal. And every one of those teeny tiny little threads that are in there is actually a microtube. Inside of that microtube is the other component, which is ground substance. Ground substance is transparent, gel-like substance that works like a hydraulic fluid in the microtubules. Now, this ground substance combined with elastocollagen can sometimes get very stiff and stuck. And so movement, manual therapy, and hydration and warmth change it from a more stiff position to a more elastic and more fluid, thus making us creating the experience of oftentimes a release type of process. Fascia is linked to our mental and emotional states. So when we experience stress or contraction in our mind, whether we are aware of it or not, fascia creates a physical contraction in our body. When injured, the nervous system will unconsciously contract to protect any injured tissue. These unconscious contractions we call armoring. Armoring causes decreased range of motion at associated joints, decreased strength at associated muscle groups with that joint, and decreases the muscle's ability to lengthen and shorten. Along with this usually comes pain and discomfort. So if you're considering myofascial release, why should you get myofascial release? Well, myofascial release is helpful with these psychological reasons as well as physiological reasons because of its direct connection between the two worlds. The fascia, in my mind, is a common denominator between our mind and our physical body. Now, if you happen to have one of these conditions and are not under the care of a counselor or therapist of some kind, we kind of err against it because against getting myofascial release because of the mental emotional content that can come up. So if you're diagnosed with any one of these listed here and not under the care, we suggest you proceed with extreme caution. Now, if you are under the care of a therapist, bring it on. Let's go. It's wonderful work. Physiologically, we can't perform MFR on any kind of burns, which includes sunburns. We can't perform it on broken tissues, puncture wounds, ripped muscles, torn skin, surgery scars, broken bones, yada, yada, yada. We can't work on those. Also, we cannot perform them directly on things that are kind of inside of the body that are put there because of surgery. In this case, we're talking about mesh from herniation surgeries, but that also includes ports, pacemakers, things along those lines. All right, so what does the application of MFR look like? Well, our tradition comes from some specific teachers, John F. Barnes, PT, and Leon Chatow, NDDO. MFR's signature treatment style creates an environment for armoring to decrease and the affected tissues to adapt as the client heals and engages in their rehab process. So we don't really do strokes in myofascial release. I usually suggest that MFR is not a traditional massage therapy where there is lotions and oils and strokes and different things along those lines. MFR uses something called holds, and each one of these holds has two primary components, pressure and timing. First off, pressure is pretty straightforward, okay? Pressure is going to be any kind of pushing into the body from surface into the center. That depth barrier and then also along with the depth barrier, the elastic barrier is pretty self-explanatory. It's pushing in and also stretching the tissues in a certain way. So we apply that type of pressure. Timing wise, it's very different than a lot of traditional massage therapy. Every one of our holds is at least 90 seconds. All right. And can be held as long as 15 minutes. So as we're doing our sessions, if you're noticing that there's not a lot of movement going around, your therapist, me, has not fallen asleep. It just means that they're following the tension lines that are going on in the fascial system. During each hold, you can get these very curious types of sensations throughout your system. Different types of sensations can vary. We have a short list here: increase or decrease of temperature in the body, or a sense of pressure in the body. So it can be an increase of pressure or decrease of pressure. Also, we can get sometimes itching, a bubbling sensation in the tissues, or burning sensations in the tissues. We can also get, obviously, pleasant sensations, feel good things, and uncomfortable and painful stuff can arise sometimes. Also, what arises because of the fascia's connection to our psychological stress and the traumas that we've been through, oftentimes a need to fidget can surface. So if you notice any of these things coming up, please let your therapist know, because that kind of helps us understand how to kind of work the session and support you and your rehabilitation that much more. Also, sensations can be localized, or they can, which means at the point of contact, or they can do what we call referring. A referral sensation is a sensation that occurs anywhere other than the point of contact. So I could be working on the front of your thigh, and you could, let's say, your front of your right thigh, and you would feel it in your left ankle. So these types of referral sensations we really want to know about. They can feel weird, and that word comes up a lot sometimes, but it's a natural part of the three-dimensionality of the fascia. And it also alludes to oftentimes how the fascia in its interconnection is also releasing. So these are good things to keep up with. Always let us know about those sensations. Pain and discomfort are a natural response that arise when injured tissues are being stimulated in ways that feel risky. For this reason, pain and discomfort can feel scary, and we can feel a little bit like we're in danger. In MFR, the pressure we apply is nowhere near dangerous to any tissues, injured or otherwise. The majority of times, pain arises only when armoring comes down and exposes the injured tissue behind the armoring. So armor protects injured tissues. And also remember, we want unneeded armoring to come down. We want it to adapt to the healing process. We don't want armoring to limit us beyond the period of natural tissue recovery. We really want to see armoring soften and open. So when pain and discomfort arises, what do? Focus on your breathing. We've all kind of heard of the pain scale. It's a 1 to 10 scale, 1 being hardly any pain, if any, and 10 being some of the worst pain ever. So in myofascial release, we like to hang out in the area right around 1 to 4. When armoring does start to soften and reveal injured tissue, though, pain can spike up to like a 6 or 7. And when that happens, once again, focus on your breathing. Breathing changes oxygen and carbon dioxide levels in the blood, releases healing biochemistry out of the brain, and affects our brain state, which oftentimes combines together for more healing and integration. In MFR, we have something called a healing crisis. Now, this sounds dramatic, but really isn't. It's just this period of 36 to 48 hours when the body is going to be going through kind of like a recalibration process. And that's going to be guided by something called proprioceptors. And they tell us proprioceptors are a type of cell that tells the body where it is in space. So if you put your hand behind your back and you can't see it, it's your proprioceptors that tells your nervous system where you're at, what that hand is doing. During that healing crisis time, since your body is recalibrating its relationship to gravity and physical space and things along those lines, you can sometimes feel clumsiness, maybe a sense of being taller or lopsided. You can also sometimes misjudge the weight of objects. So these are all proprioceptor associated. Other things that can come up because the fascia is so interwoven into the whole system of the body is we can get sometimes flu-like symptoms because the fascia really affects the lymphatic system and also the digestive system. Since it does affect the digestive system, we can sometimes see cravings and thirst and changes in bowel movements that arise, as well as changes in sleeping habits. Speaking of sleeping, you may get some exciting dreams. You also may notice, other than dreams, you may notice that there's fluctuations in emotions, maybe even memories may surface. Lastly, you can also get changes in symptoms of past injuries where fascia is kind of unwinding and releasing. So places where you've had scars or past injuries and things along those lines. For this reason, we're going to suggest that if you are planning on doing any kind of really high output event where you're really going to have to push your edges, we do not suggest you get an MFR session within 48 hours of that high output activity. So if you know you have to run a race, or you're playing a game, or you're doing a performance where that really is demanding of you, we do not suggest you schedule a session within that 48-hour period of that event or activity. Otherwise, you don't have to change anything about your schedule whatsoever. Okay, so it's perfectly appropriate to do an MFR session within 48 hours, or even right after or right before an exercise session, normal activities and different things along those lines. So you don't have to really change much about that.